Hello, and welcome to Between the Rows. I'm Robert Arnason of the Western Producer, your host for this week's show. In Manitoba and eastern Saskatchewan, there's been three types of weather this spring: snow, rain, and heavy rain. Seeding is weeks behind schedule, and a percentage of cropland will not be planted this spring. On this week's show, we'll speak with Bruce Burnett of Glacier FarmMedia to learn more about seeding progress and the risk of abandoned acres. Also, 2 years ago, meat made from plants was the hottest thing in the food industry, but 2021 was a year of tepid sales. Later on in the show, I'll talk to a Western Producer reporter about market demand for plant-based meats. First up on the show, to put it simply, Manitoba is soaked. By May 28th, about 130 millimeters of rain and snow had fallen on Winnipeg in the month. Then, another storm arrived May 29th, dumping yet another 30 millimeters on the city. Normal precipitation for May is more like 55 millimeters. Other parts of the eastern prairies saw similar amounts or even more rain in May, flooding cropland and turning fields into lakes. Here to provide an update on the rain and seeding progress in the region is Bruce Burnett, Director of Weather and Markets for Glacier FarmMedia. But before we get to Bruce, here's a word from our sponsor.
When you step foot on my farm, you become a part of it. I will tell you all about my land, what's working, what's not, as if we've spent our whole lives together. Our passion for farming makes us a community, and as part of that community, I want to see us all be successful, whether I'm working on your farm or with my job at Case IH. My name is Kelsey, I'm a farmer, and I work for Case IH.
Case IH, built by farmers.
And now, back to my interview with Bruce Burnett of Glacier FarmMedia. Hey Bruce, thanks for coming on Between the Rows. I appreciate your time.
Good to be here.
So, it's come on the radio and other media reports. This has been one of the wettest springs in Manitoba's history. When you look at the data of all the rain and snow we've received in the last, 90 days or 2 months or so, how do you analyze where we're at right now?
Certainly for Winnipeg itself, we have set a new record for precipitation during April through May. And again, we're speaking on May 31st, so we haven't really finished the day yet, but it looks like a new record. The closest year in terms of amounts are basically back in 1896. So again, a healthy record for Winnipeg in terms of the precipitation amounts, almost 284 millimeters during the 2 months, and that compares with 278 millimeters back in 1896. So some very heavy rains. If you wanted to sort of compare with average, the 30 years average that we use in climatology is basically just under 100 millimeters. So almost 3 times normal precipitation over the past 2 months in Winnipeg and surrounding areas.
Yeah, so looking beyond Winnipeg, has it been just as severe in western Manitoba and eastern Saskatchewan or not quite as bad there?
Amounts have been variable, but generally speaking, out in the western areas, it's slightly less than that. But again, some very wet regions from essentially east Saskatchewan through western Manitoba. The heaviest amounts that we've received, at least recently, have actually been close to the Manitoba escarpments. So essentially from the Morden area all the way up through to Dauphin, we've seen some heavier amounts. And again, that's caused by the upslope precipitation that we've seen from the various numbers of systems that we've had roll through the eastern prairies here during this late winter and early spring.
Okay, so let's just talk about this most recent rain that happened, well, I guess Monday and today being Tuesday, the 30th. So I'm seeing amounts anywhere from like 30 millimeters up to 50 in some localized locations, maybe even higher, like 70. What does this all mean for seeding? I mean, is there going to be some cases where basically seeding will stop for 10 days or a week, or what's the impact here?
Well, in the areas that we've received the heaviest amounts, let's say 50 millimeters up to 80 millimeters in that range, certainly it means extended delays. A lot depends on how dry the soils were in those particular areas before the rains happened. Some areas were still wet from flooding, and certainly only portions of the field may be dry enough even to put equipment on. Those fields after these rains are going to take probably a good week, if not more, to get dry enough for seeding to resume. Again, a lot of what happens over the next couple of weeks is dependent on what our temperatures are, how good the drying conditions are, essentially, in those areas. If you were looking at areas that maybe had a little less precipitation and were drier, so that you had some seeding, you were doing some general seeding in those regions, and a lot of Western Manitoba was in that bucket, and Eastern Saskatchewan. It's probably going to take about 5 days here to get farmers back out in the fields. Okay,
so prior to this Monday, Tuesday rain, there was a stretch of decent weather, maybe 3, 4, 5 days, depending on where you were, where guys obviously had an opportunity, a small window to get some things done. Do you have any sense of overall seeding progress in the Eastern Prairies? Are we talking 30%, 40%? What's your sense of it?
Again, it just depends a lot on the regions. There's a lot of areas that, have less than 10% complete. But again, I would say as a general rule, or as a generalization, sort of Eastern Saskatchewan and Western Manitoba are in this sort of 10% to 30% done range, and it would vary highly between each and every region, but that's more or less where we're at. And those areas are probably going to be the first ones to get back in the fields over the next, let's say, week or so. So those areas we could see some more advancement as we go through. Of course, we're going to get the crop reports here later this week. That'll give us an idea as to how much did get planted in those dry spots last week before the rain started on Thursday and Friday.
All right, so it is May 30th. So, there's not a huge window of time here left to get something in the ground. Do you anticipate that we're going to see a significant number of abandoned acres, or is it too early to say that yet?
It's probably a tad early to say it, although we are going to see some acreage loss. Those areas that are sort of been flooded here for most of the spring, I think basically those areas probably aren't going to see be able to be seeded this year, especially if we get any rainfall here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But other than that, I think, again, we are looking at a lot of fields where the low spots aren't going to get planted this year because of the excess moisture conditions. So we will see some acreage loss, even if we do get a lot of these areas planted here by the crop insurance deadlines, or even a little bit later.
So a lot of the comments I've heard so far is that there's going to be a shift in acres to canola because you can still, plant canola the first week of June or up to like maybe June 8th or 9th and still get, a really, but like pretty decent yield, like maybe 90% of potential yield. Do you think that's going to happen where we're going to see a shift towards more canola, or what's your expectation?
Again, I think this depends a lot on the region. Along with the late planting of canola, again, there is a frost risk there at the tail end that's probably a little bit more severe for canola. So farmers are going to have to juggle things quite a bit. And secondly, I think there's a point here where we're going to have to start talking about earlier maturing crops like oats and barley in the equation as well here. So I think we are going to see some switching. Right now, again, I think farmers are going to be fairly focused on getting their wheat and canola planted and some of the other crops that need longer growing seasons. And after that, they'll probably start looking at switching some of these acres. But I would anticipate that we're going to see a significant switching of acreage out of wheat, but also probably going to lose some canola area here into some of the earlier maturing crops because we just don't have the time to get the crops in the ground.
What about crops like corn and soybeans?
Well, again, corn planting is probably the most at risk right now because you're getting too late for planting corn. So it's going to be riskier again if you are putting up silage. That's one thing, but for grain corn, certainly we're losing that. Soybeans, we have a little bit of a window as well here, but again, that's closing rapidly as well. So again, the acreage situation's in flux here, and I think farmers are going to be very adaptable here as we move through because in reality, prices are good for everything. So even some of the later seeded crops have good potential for making some money this year.
Okay, absolute last one here. So under a best case scenario, let's say we get like a stretch of like 7-10 days of sunny, warm weather. Are you assuming that like 90-95% of Manitoba's acreage will go in the ground, like that high a percentage?
I think it would be tough to get too much above 90% of the acreage planted over that, let's say, 2-week period. But certainly, to get in that 80 to 85% range is within the possibility. If we had 3 weeks of very dry weather here, certainly we could see some late plantings there that would get us up into that 90-95% planted range. But again, that takes a lot of cooperation from Mother Nature, which really hasn't seemed to be that cooperative this spring so far.
Yeah, that's a very accurate statement. Well, thanks, Bruce. You've been listening to Bruce Burnett, Director of Weather and Markets Information for Glacier FarmMedia. Thanks for your time, Bruce.
Thank you.
Next up on the show, 2022 has not been kind to Beyond Meat, the company that makes burgers, sausages, and other meat products from plants. The stock price started the year at $70 US and is now trading around $25. On top of that, the company's new spokesperson, Kim Kardashian, just appeared in a controversial commercial where she faked eating the vegetarian meat. Beyond Meat is just one of many companies in the broader meat made from plants industry, a sector that struggled in 2021. In late April, Sean Pratt of the Western Producer reported on market demand for vegetarian meat and how sales have gone sideways in the last year or so. I spoke with Sean from his home in Saskatoon. Hey Sean, thanks for coming on Between the Rows. I really appreciate your time.
No problem, Robert.
So I guess it was about a month ago or so, sometime in April, a report came out on the market for plant-based foods. Can you tell us who wrote the report and sort of give us a summary of what the report said?
Yeah, the group called the Good Food Institute, and they were reporting on the growth in plant-based meat products in 2021. And there was not much to report. The growth was zero. There's absolutely no growth. So the sales stayed static at US $1.4 billion. So that was kind of a shocker for the industry, because they were coming off a year where there was 46% increase in plant-based meat sales in 2020. So it went from 46% to 0%. And the stats in Canada were fairly similar, according to a Nielsen report. And there was a little bit of growth in Canada. I think it was about 7% or so. But that was way down from 34% the previous year. So a similar trend. And I know that some folks in that sphere are kind of concerned about the results.
So how do they explain this lack of growth in 2021? I mean, there was a lot of supply chain issues for a number of food companies. Is that part of the explanation?
That was definitely part of the explanation. For instance, yellow pea production in Canada was down 45% last year because of the drought. And France also experienced problems. And yellow peas are a big part of the plant-based meat sector. So there was issues there. There's, of course, logistics issues that were around. But really the big thing that they were saying was that the growth in 2020 was abnormally high because of COVID. Everybody was buying groceries instead of eating out. And so the whole grocery segment just went crazy, cuckoo bongo kind of thing. And so here the plant-based meat industry had a tough time building on that wild success in 2020. So a lot of them think that this is sort of a temporary setback, that things will, turn around again in 2022. However, the report from the U.S. said that that doesn't appear to be happening. The first few months of 22, sales were pretty stagnant.
So, yeah, I mean, you're not the only reporter who's looked at this. I think the Globe and Mail did a piece about Beyond Meat and its struggles with, its share price has kind of dropped off a cliff. And obviously, they're a bit desperate to gain some traction in the marketplace because I think Kim Kardashian just became their spokesperson and she appeared in a commercial recently for the company. So let's have a quick listen to that commercial.
I believe so much in the mission of Beyond Meat that I've stepped in to help with my greatest asset, my taste. This plant-based meat is not only amazingly delicious, but it's also better for you and better for the planet. It's a simple change that makes a really big difference. Fun. And now that I'm Beyond Meat's Chief Taste Consultant, there's never been a better time to go beyond. I believe.
So what I find interesting about this is, if I'm a corporate leader, I wouldn't put Kim Kardashian on the top of my list for spokespeople, but, maybe I'm out of touch with like what the youth of today are interested in, but I don't know. It just seems a little odd to me that Kim Kardashian is a spokesperson for Beyond Meat. What's your take on that?
Well, I guess she's got the profile, didn't she? But I'm not sure what makes her a spokesperson on Beyond Meat. Is she a vegan or is she vegetarian? Do you know?
I don't know. She's got nice hair. I'm not really sure what her credentials are exactly to be a chief taste consultant. But maybe that's not the point, right? Maybe the point is you just need celebrities these days to sell your product, right? So, yeah.
Especially when you're a company that Beyond Meat posted a net loss of $182 million last year, which again kind of shocked everybody in that industry. They were sort of the poster company for alternative meat, and that's a not insignificant loss there. They said in their annual report that it was a quote temporary disruption in U.S. retail growth.
Okay.
But, Maple Leaf Foods also, they didn't have a loss in that category, but they had a 4.7% decline in sales, which kind of shocked them. The company president, Michael McCain, said, we now expect steady but not spectacular growth in this category. And they said that they're how did he phrase it? They're pivoting their investment strategy, whatever that means. But it sort of sounds like they've got some waning interest in that sector of the company. Yeah,
I had a look at this the report on the retail market for plant-based foods in the U.S., the one that you reported on it, and it's actually there's some interesting data here on plant-based milk versus plant-based meat, and I'll just go through some of the data here quickly. So, for example, if you look at, say, the number of households that use a certain product or category, plant-based milk is like way higher. It's like 42% of U.S. households, consume oat milk or soy milk, and when it comes to plant-based meats, it's more like 19%, and that's a huge difference. And the other one that really jumped out at me, the data point, was that if you look at like total market share, plant-based meat has like 1.4% of the entire market in the U.S., whereas oat milk, soy milk, and almond milk has like 16% of the marketplace. I mean, that's like a huge difference in terms of market share. It's not even close.
That is huge. Yeah, I didn't realize that. So I seem to recall, though, that they said the entire plant-based food sector that experienced, some growth. So that must be where that growth was coming from. It sure wasn't from the plant-based meat side of things. Part of me kind of wonders, if a lot of the exponential growth that we saw in 2020 was just people just trying it for, one time and maybe not coming back. But there is some data from the Canadian folks that seem to suggest that there is a lot of return business. I think they said that they did a study and 2/3 of Canadians frequently consume plant-based foods, and 31% said they plan to eat more. So, maybe there's a lot of repeat business, but something in the back of my head just kind of wonders if there's a lot of people just trying it and then not going back.
Yeah, and I guess this issue goes beyond the whole question of, how does plant-based meat taste compared to, a regular burger or a regular typical hot dog. A lot of this, speculation or interest in these products is based on some environmental claims that, these plant-based meats are going to save the planet. And that's led to a lot of reaction from the livestock sector saying, well, wait a minute, we're not that bad, right? Like, here's the actual data. So in a way, maybe this had created a bit of an opportunity for the beef industry and the protein industry, saying, hey, listen, us having cattle grazing, on the landscape is not so bad. And maybe it gives the livestock sector an opportunity to kind of tell its story. So maybe it might be a good thing. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought of that. Yeah. I wonder, though, if plant-based meat sales are truly tailing off, that would be worrisome because there's a lot of pea processing plants popping up across the Canadian prairies. And, I think there's just a couple of announcements within the last week about facilities in Alberta that are starting up. And they're not small facilities. I think one was a $150 million plant and the other one was a $250 million plant, something like that. So, there's a lot of money being poured into these pea processing facilities, so they better hope that sales stay up.
Right. Or that there's a bigger market for, protein bars and other such snack products, that maybe that side of the marketplace is the bigger opportunity. Who knows?
That could be, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Sean. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your thoughts and insight.
Yeah, no worries.
All right. You've been listening to Sean Pratt, a reporter with the Western Producer in Saskatoon, who spoke about slowing sales for Beyond Meat and other plant-based meat companies. Well, that's it for this week's show. I'm Robert Arnason of the Western Producer. Thanks for listening.
When you step foot on my farm, you become a part of it. I will tell you all about my land, what's working, what's not, as if we've spent our whole lives together. Our passion for farming makes us a community, and as part of that community, I want to see us all be successful, whether I'm working on your farm or with my job at Case IH. My name is Kelsey, I'm a farmer, and I work for Case IH.
Case IH, built by farmers.